The Prime Minister has officially launched the UN Climate Change Conference, which comes to Glasgow in November. Boris Johnson said 2020 would be a defining year of action for the country and the planet. A big announcement on electric vehicles was overshadowed by a row with the outgoing president of the conference. Well, our environment correspondent Kevin Keane joins us now from outside the Scottish Events campus, where the event will be held. Kevin, an interesting few days.
Yes, absolutely. This conference, this high-profile event that's due to be held later this year across the river from where we are just now, has really turned into a pantomime over the last few days, with the high-profile sacking by number 10 of the person who was meant to be in charge of it, and then for several days both sides briefing against the other, throwing insults and accusations quite openly. Boris Johnson will have hopes that today, in launching that event in London, he's hoping that that will have drawn a line under that chapter of this event. For 2 weeks in November, much of this area on the banks of the Clyde will become UN territory. Presidents and prime ministers from across the planet will walk through these doors with the world watching to see if they can agree a plan to tackle climate change. Today, the UK Prime Minister outlined what he called a year of action leading to the Glasgow conference to show the world we're serious.
We have to deal with our CO2 emissions, and that is why the UK is calling for us to get to net zero as soon as possible, to get for every country to announce credible targets to get there. That's what we want from Glasgow. Hello.
The event was launched at the Science Centre in not Glasgow but London, joined by Sir David Attenborough, who's campaigned for the issue to be taken seriously for many decades.
It's a huge encouragement to those of us who have been worrying about this problem for a very long time to know that now the government of this country is going to do something in Glasgow at the end of this year. I look forward to it.
But the launch has been slightly overshadowed by the sacked president of COP26, Claire O'Neill, who's hit out at the Prime Minister.
You know, it's good that...
Really? He said that to you, did he?
In an interview for BBC Radio, she accused Boris Johnson of not showing leadership.
I am told by those involved that the original analysis was hundreds of millions of pounds off track, that the Scottish Government has absolutely behaved disgracefully and has been contracting buildings, for example, that are on the COP site, that should be absolutely made available to the conference, and that there is a complete standoff.
That standoff is said to be about the Scottish Government booking the Glasgow Science Centre as a base for fringe events during the conference. It was even suggested the whole thing might have to be moved out of Scotland as a result.
Yes, we have taken the Glasgow Science Centre for the 2 weeks of the COP, but at no point when we were discussing with the Glasgow Science Centre that potential contract was there any expressed interest by the UK Government at the time. And the boundaries of the COP did not extend across the river onto the other side of the Clyde, which of course is where the Glasgow Science Centre is.
I have to say it was never in doubt for us in the city or in the City Council, but clearly the internal wranglings of the UK Government over the past few days had caused some uncertainty. That was a big concern for us. I hope that that uncertainty has been put to bed this morning. The Prime Minister explicitly said that it would be in Glasgow, and much more importantly, I think Sir David Attenborough said it.
Boris Johnson had hoped today would be about electric vehicles. A ban on new petrol and diesel cars will be brought forward to 2035 and include hybrids for the first time. But the internal squabbles have taken the charge out of that announcement and left everyone drained.
So, Kevin, plenty of infighting over the last few days. Where do we go from here then?
Absolutely, but one thing that we were expecting to hear today is who would be the replacement for Claire O'Neill. What was promised over the weekend is that somebody higher profile of cabinet position would take her place, and everybody thought that would be announced today. Possibly someone like Michael Gove, who's said to be quite interested in this position. So the first thing is to wait for that appointment and for that person to drive events forward towards what will happen there in November. But we've also heard today that Nicola Sturgeon has written written to Boris Johnson tonight, offering the services of her Environment Secretary Rosanna Cunningham to sit on a special climate change cabinet that Boris Johnson is setting up. It'll be interesting to see whether that spirit of cooperation that Claire O'Neill called for will now begin after this weekend of uncertainty. No word yet from Boris Johnson or Number 10 over whether that offer has been accepted.
Indeed, OK. Thank you, Kevin.